Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the class. In the previous class, we were discussing about those provisions of Indian Constitution which are related with the strong central government. Though our Constitution has made provision for federal government, still there are many provisions in our Constitution which make the central government much more strong than the state governments. And in this regard, we have seen the provisions. What are the provisions which make the center more powerful? And we have seen that the distribution of power, which is done through the constitution, is uh, in favor of center because residuary power is given to the center. Then, in the matter of concurrent list, if any conflict arises, then the law made by the center will prevail. So these are the division of power. We can say that this division of power is in favor of the center. Then we have seen that how the existence of a state, its name, its territorial boundary, everything uh, is controlled by the parliament. Then the next provision which we saw that our constitution has some emergency provisions, and there are three types of emergency which are mentioned in our constitution. The first is national emergency, second is state emergency, and the third is financial emergency. And during these emergency period, what happens, the federal structure of the country turns to unitary structure, and in this way the center becomes more powerful. And then we saw that in our constitution, um, all the financial power and responsibilities have been given to central government, which the items which generate revenue are under the control of the central government, and the state government has to depend on the grants and assistance, financial assistance from the center. And in this regard, what is seen that the center discriminate between the state which are governed by the same party which is ruling at the center, then there is no problem in sanctioning of the grants and financial assistance. But if the state is ruled by opposition party, then they are not treated equally. So in this way we see that the states are at the mercy of the center. And then the next point which we have discussed is the role of the governor. The governor is the executive head of the state, and the governor plays the role of the agent of the center. Many times it has been experienced that the governor plays the role of the agent of the central government, and many times it has the power to send a report to the president that in a country, in a state, in the state in which he is the executive head, the government is not functioning according to the constitution and the constitutional machinery is failed. If the governor sent this type of report, then there will be emergency will be proclaimed in that state. Article 356 will be used by the central cabinet. And in normal circumstances also, the governor has the power to reserve a bill for the assent of the president when after getting passed from the state legislature, the bill comes to the governor for his signature. But instead of giving his assent, he can reserve that bill for the assent of the president. And this in this regard, what we see that the president does not use his discretionary power in this situation. The president acts according to the aid and advice given by the cabinet. So in this way, what happens that the central government gets an opportunity to delay the state legislation, and also it can examine such bills and it can veto also. So we have discussed so far. Now there is another point which need to be discussed, and this is we can see that there can be such occasions in which the state government, the central government uh, needs to legislate on matters from the state list. Some matter or some subject is listed in the state list in the constitution, but still what we see that there are some situations in which the central government can get this authority to make laws on the matters of subject on the matters of state list. But for in order to get that authority, there is need of approval by the Rajya Sabha. As we know, Rajya Sabha is the representative body of states, as the name suggests, Rajya Sabha, है ना? So it is important that the central parliament or the union parliament can make laws on the subjects of a state list, but it can do only when the Rajya Sabha ratifies such move, because Rajya Sabha is considered as the representative body of the states. But here what we see in the our experience has proved that the members of the Rajya Sabha does not work according to the interest of the state. They are not there to represent the interest of the state, but they are governed by the party politics. Instead of their affiliation to the state, they are more affiliated to their parties. So the decision is not taken according to the interest of the states. This is the problem. Then we see this is one of the point that on when Rajya Sabha ratifies, the central parliament gets authority to make laws on matters of the state list. Now the second situation, now the second point within this point is the constitution clearly states that executive powers of the center are superior to the executive powers of the state. It is written in our constitution. You can see it here. Article 257 clause 1. This article says that the executive power of every state shall be so exercised as not to impede or prejudice the exercise of the executive power of the union. So what does it mean? That the executive power of the center are superior to the executive power of the states. That is why the states are given instruction that it should exercise its executive power in such a manner that the exercise of executive power of the union should not be obstructed. Okay, and so I have discussed this much now. And the executive power of the union shall extend to the giving of such direction to a state as may appear to the government of India to be necessary for that purpose. So it is the instruction of the constitution that the executive power of every state shall be exercised not to obstruct the exercise of the executive power of the union. And the executive of the union executive has the right to give direction. The union executive can give direction to a state or many states as required. It can give direction to a state so that it should not obstruct the execution of the powers of the center. Okay, the executive power of a state shall not obstruct the executive power of the union. And in order to get this happen, the central executive has the authority to give direction to a state so that it should not obstruct the exercise of the executive power of the center. So this is the situation. This is the provision which is establishing the superiority of the central executive over state executive. Okay. Now we will discuss another topic, and this topic has also been discussed when we were discussing the executive. We have two types of executive, the permanent executive and the political executive. The political executive is the leaders who hold their post through elections for a fixed period. And what is the criteria? What is their qualification? Their qualification, they are not having any kind of educational qualification. Their popularity is the only qualification. And the another executive was political executive, and this permanent executive. This permanent executive is our administrative staff who hold their post because of their merit and talent. They compete the exams and then they get selected for that post, and they are holding the post for their entire life. There is retirement age. Up to reaching that retirement age, they are holding the post. So this is our administrative staff, which are called bureaucracy also, bureaucrats. So in India, what we see, there are, in our country, we have all India services. This all India services are common to the entire country. And the officers who are selected for this all India services, they serve in the administration of the states. The services all India. Okay. They are selected through a lengthy process, and this selection is done by Union Public Service Commission, which is centrally organized. Okay. And after getting recruited, these people who belong to all India services, they serve in the administration of the states. Okay. So an IAS officer who becomes the collector, or an IPS officer who serves as the commissioner of police. Okay. IAS officer जो होते हैं वो collector बनते हैं, district collector. Okay. And IPS officers becomes a commissioner of police. Now they are under the control of central government, but their area of operation is state. So just try to understand the situation. these IAS and IPS officers are working in the territory of the state, but they are under the control of the central government. The states has no power to take any kind of disciplinary action against these IAS and IPS officers. Any disciplinary action against these officers can be taken by the central government only. So this is the condition. They are working in the state, but the state government is not able to start any kind of disciplinary action against them, and they also cannot remove these officers from services. All these things can be done by the center. So this is also a tool through which our center controls the governance of the state. There is another provision also which gives more power to the parliament. And in this regard, we will discuss Article 33 and Article 34 of the Constitution. Article 33 gives power to the Parliament to restrict the application of the fundamental rights of the armed forces, the paramilitary forces, and police, etc. So it is the power of the parliament. It can legislate regarding in order to execute this Article 33. The parliament can legislate accordingly, and by the legislation of the parliament, it can restrict the application of fundamental rights of armed forces and paramilitary forces, police, etc. So this was done because this limitation on fundamental right was done by the constitution, because these armed forces, these paramilitary forces, these police, they are serving the nation. They should not be given the right to demonstration or strike or to form associations or unions. Then there will be a lot of indiscipline, and it will cause the national interest also. So right to restrict the fundamental right of the armed forces and police is given to the parliament. State legislatures has nothing to do in this regard. Then we have Article 34 also, and this Article 34 is regarding the restrictions on the fundamental rights which are given by this constitution when martial law is in force in any area. If in any area martial law is there, then what happens? According to Article 34, there will be restriction on the fundamental rights in that area, and it means that if a government servant is on duty, then he or she has the authority, he or she has the guarantee to for any act done by him or her in order to maintain law and order in that area. So this is the special powers which is given to the armed forces, and which can be given to the armed forces, paramilitary forces and police in order to maintain law and order in the area where martial law is there. Okay. So in this regard also, the parliament has the power to legislate. Then only these armed forces or paramilitary forces or police will be able to use these special powers. And in this regard, we have this Armed Forces Spatial Power Act. This is called AFSPA. This is a very controversial act because this act gives the special power to the armed forces, and many times it has been alleged that the armed forces overuse their power, they misuse their special powers, and they target the civilians, and in many circumstances many allegation has been leveled against them. So and this is a controversial act. So in the context in which we are discussing this act is regarding the strong center. So these are the provisions which make the which gives the legislature, the central legislature, more power than the state legislature. So now we have discussed the important provisions of the constitution which provide for the strong center in spite of having federal structure. Now we will move to another segment, and in this segment we will know about the conflicts. What are the conflicts in India's federal system? So first of all, we must know the source of conflict, from where this conflict, why this conflict is originating. Because our constitution has adopted federal structure, our constitution recognizes the separate identity of the states, but after recognizing the separate identity of the states, our constitution gives more power to the center. So this situation will naturally lead to conflict, because if you are accepting the identity, if you are giving recognition to separate identity of the state, then the state will expect a greater role. They will expect more power in the governance of the state as well as in the governance of the country. So what they find that they are given separate identity, but they are not having power in accordance with that separate identity. The center has been given more power than the state. So it is natural to have conflict. There are various types of demands from the states from time to time. States have demanded that they should be given more powers and more autonomy. Autonomy means there should not be interference from the center. This led to tension and conflict in the relation between the center and the state. So these demands which is made by the states are causing conflict. There are many types of conflict. Legal conflict. Many times legal dispute or legal conflict arises between the center and the state, and this legal conflict can be resolved by the judiciary, because our constitution gives judiciary the role of the interpreter of the constitution. So whenever there is legal dispute between the center or the state and the state, or between the states, then it can be resolved through the judiciary. But political disputes also arise between the center and the state, and between states also. And these political disputes need to be resolved through negotiations. And now we will discuss some of the conflicts of India's federal system. Center-state relation. So what we see that we have seen in we have discussed this also earlier that the constitution makes provision for federal structure. The constitution makes provision for a democratic government, but the constitutional provision is not everything. By only providing for democracy or by only providing for federal structure in the constitution, we cannot ensure that the federal system will be there successfully. Democracy will be there successfully. The constitution is only a framework, or we can say it is only a skeleton. It gives a structure. It should be like that. But the flesh and blood is provided by actual process of politics. What is going on in the country actually on the ground level? What is happening? What is the actual process of politics? This determines the successfulness of the federal structure or democracy or any provision of the constitution can only become successful when there is actual process of politics is suitable. If the actual process of politics is not suitable for federalism, then the federal structure will not be working in spite of having the provisions in the constitution. So we see that if in India we can say that for the last 70 years we have federal structure and it is working successfully, but our constitutional provisions cannot be said to be solely responsible for this successful functioning of the federal structure. In our country, if the federal structure has been successful, it is because of the political process. We see that in 1950s and early 1960s, the foundation of our federalism was laid under Jawaharlal Nehru. It was also a period of Congress dominance over the center as well as the state. You have read in the previous, no, that is in class 12th. So, I'm telling you that when India became independent and the first election was taken place and then second and third up to the year 1967, the Congress was the only party which was ruling at the center, and in most of the states there was the rule of Congress party. So these 1950s and the decade of 1950 and the decade of 1960, during this period, during this 20 years, we can say there was dominance of Congress party only, because Congress was the only party which have such a popular support and popular base also, and it has the legacy of national movement also, and because of these things, Congress was in an advantageous position and its dominance was there in the center as well as in the states. But at that time also some conflicts were there, and this conflict was there only for the formation of new states, because when India was under the colonial rule of British, we, the national leaders of our country, were in support of the formation of the linguistic states. They were of the opinion that states should be the natural units, and they should be formed on the basis of language. But when India became independent, then because of partition and violence, what happened that our national leaders were not where they became fearful of the integrity of the country, and that is the reason that they did not give this they did not formed the states on the basis of language, because they feared that if they form the states on the basis of language, then the country may disintegrate. So there was in the in this period 1950s and 60s, we saw the conflict was there only for the formation of new states, because people uh, were in favor of the formation of linguistic states, and for in order to get that states formed, people has to struggle a lot. There were so many movements, and then the central government uh, has to reorganize the states on the basis of language. So that was the only problem during the period of 1950s and 60s. Okay. Other than that issue, other than this formation of new states, there was no problem. There was no conflict between the center and the states. The states were hopeful that they would be making progress with the help of the grants in aid from the center, because in all the almost all the states, center Congress was in rule, and at the center Congress was in rule, so there was no conflict. Everything was going on very peacefully, and the states were very much hopeful that with the financial aid from the center, they will be able to make good progress, economic progress. And the all the people belonging to different states, all the leaders were having optimist view about the policies of socio-economic development which was designed by the center. So there was no conflict. Only conflict arose for the formation of new state. Other than this conflict, there was no conflict, there was no tension between the center and the state in the 1950s and 1960s. Okay, so after that, we see that different types of problems arose, and we will discuss this in the next class.